Welcome to Whispers of the Moon, where we share spine-chilling tales and dark mysteries. Thanksgiving might be a time for family and gratitude, but sometimes the holiday brings more than we bargained for. So, settle in, grab a warm blanket, and prepare yourself for 3 terrifying tales that might make you think twice about Thanksgiving. Story number 1. The Haunted Harvest. The farm stood isolated from the world, surrounded by dense woods that pressed in like giant reaching hands. Tom and Claire had inherited the property from Tom's grandfather, a man Tom barely remembered, a figure known more through hushed family stories than personal memories. Despite the farm's eerie reputation, Tom convinced Claire it could be a fresh start, a place to build their own family. Thanksgiving marked the first family gathering at the farm since they inherited it. Relatives traveled miles to attend, drawn by both family loyalty and curiosity about the old house. From the moment Claire stepped inside, she felt a sense of dread. Shadows seemed to shift on their own, and she occasionally heard a faint scraping noise from the basement. When she mentioned it, Tom brushed it off, chalking it up to old pipes. After a hearty meal, the family gathered in the dim living room, surrounded by dusty antiques and old family photos. The ancestral portraits seemed to stare down with cold eyes. As the evening wore on, Tom's mother began telling stories about Tom's grandfather, a stern man with peculiar habits. But one story made the room fall silent. A strange Thanksgiving ritual the grandfather had insisted on every year. Late at night, he would go alone to the oak tree at the edge of the property and bury something there. No one knew what he buried, and he never let anyone watch. "What did he bury?" Claire asked, unable to hide her curiosity. Tom's mother hesitated. "We don't know." He would look at anyone who asked with those cold, piercing eyes and say, "Mind your own business." After a while, we all stopped asking. That night, the family went to bed, but Claire couldn't shake the image of the oak tree. Curiosity tugged at her, and despite the chill in the air, she slipped outside to see the tree for herself. The yard was silent, and the shadows cast by the moonlight made the farm seem even more ominous. When she reached the oak tree, Claire froze. At its base was a freshly disturbed mound of earth, the soil looking like it had been recently dug. Her heart raced, and a chilling sense of dread crept up her spine. Just as she was trying to process this strange discovery, a movement caught her eye. From behind the tree stepped an older man, his figure shrouded in shadow. His face was gaunt, with hollow eyes, and he looked hauntingly like Tom's grandfather, the man whose funeral they had attended years ago. Claire's blood ran cold as his empty gaze met hers. Slowly, he raised a single bony finger to his lips, as if to shush her. He held her gaze for a moment before stepping back into the darkness, disappearing among the shadows. In a panic, Claire turned and ran back to the house, her heart pounding as she stumbled through the door. She shook Tom awake, her voice trembling as she recounted what she had seen. "Claire, you were probably dreaming," he murmured, half asleep, dismissing it as her imagination. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling of terror that lingered. The next morning, as they gathered to clean up, Tom's uncle handed him an old, dusty box. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this," he said in a low voice. Inside, Tom found a yellowed note in shaky handwriting. The words were chilling. "Keep the family secret, or I'll be back next Thanksgiving." A cold wave of dread washed over Claire. She looked out the window toward the oak tree, its shadow stretching ominously toward the house as if to warn them. Tom followed her gaze, his face pale, and they both realized the truth. The ritual wasn't just some eccentric family secret. It was a duty, a pact with whatever lingered on that land. As the year passed, Claire and Tom felt the weight of the warning every time they looked at the oak tree. When Thanksgiving approached again, Claire asked Tom if he would honor the ritual, but Tom shook his head, dismissing it as superstition. But that Thanksgiving night, when Claire stepped outside for air, she felt a chilling presence behind her. Slowly turning, she saw a shadow standing near the oak tree, a familiar, hollow-eyed face staring at her. This time, it was her husband who was near the oak tree, not to be seen again until next Thanksgiving. A new shadow had replaced Tom's grandfather, and now he waited, watched, ready to claim those who dared break the family ritual. Story number 2. The Mirror in the Attic. Emma had grown up in a sprawling, old Victorian house with winding corridors and floors that groaned underfoot. The home had been in her family for generations, and with it came the eerie stories and whispered warnings passed down over the years. Among the legends, the tale of the witch's mirror was the most unsettling. Hidden away in the attic, the mirror was said to be cursed, showing terrifying visions to anyone who dared look into it, especially on Thanksgiving night. On Thanksgiving, as her family gathered downstairs laughing and chatting, Emma felt a gnawing curiosity tugging at her. She slipped away, climbing the narrow, creaking stairs that led to the attic. Dust floated in the cold, dim room, illuminated only by a single window clouded with grime. In the far corner, she spotted the mirror, cloaked in a black, heavy cloth, its shape barely visible under the covering. Her heart raced as she approached it, feeling a strange chill that seemed to seep from the covered glass. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and pulled the cloth away, revealing a tarnished, cracked mirror. She expected to see her own reflection staring back, perhaps a little distorted by the age of the glass. But after a few moments, the image in the mirror began to change. Instead of her usual reflection, Emma saw herself sitting at the Thanksgiving table. But her family members seated around her looked disturbingly wrong. Their faces were pale and waxen, their skins stretched tight over hollow cheeks. Their eyes were vacant, staring into nothingness, yet their mouths were stretched into unsettling, unnatural smiles. Emma's own reflection stared back at her, her expression twisted with horror. Before she could process what was happening, the family members in the mirror began to turn slowly toward her, their empty eyes seeming to focus directly on her, their smiles widening into grotesque grins. She felt an overwhelming urge to look away, but her reflection seemed trapped, frozen in place as the ghastly figures reached out toward her, their fingers clawing and grasping. A silent scream seemed to erupt from her own reflection as she watched herself trapped in the glass, unable to move, helpless to escape. Her skin began to lose color, her eyes rolling back until only the whites showed, mirroring the eerie, possessed appearance of her family members. She felt as though her very soul was being sucked into the mirror. Finally, in a desperate panic, Emma threw the cloth back over the mirror, breaking the trance, and stumbled backward, gasping for breath. She raced downstairs, her heart pounding, trying to shake off the vision. She told herself it had to have been a trick of the mind, a result of the eerie stories in the dark, drafty attic. But as she sat down at the dinner table, still trembling, she couldn't shake the lingering chill that crept up her spine. Glancing around at her family, she noticed something unsettling. Their smiles seemed just a little too wide, their eyes too empty. A cold realization settled over her. Perhaps she had not left the mirror. Story number 3. The Unexpected Guest. Marcus had chosen to spend Thanksgiving alone, secluded in a cabin deep in the woods. Estranged from his family, he wanted nothing more than silence and solitude, hoping the isolation would grant him a rare sense of peace. The cabin was miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by trees so dense they seemed to muffle the world beyond. As he was preparing his modest Thanksgiving meal, he heard a faint knock on the door. He froze, his heart pounding. No one knew he was here. Who would be visiting in such a remote place? Against his better judgment, Marcus opened the door. In the doorway stood a frail, older man, his face drawn into a sad smile that didn't reach his empty, hollow eyes. He wore a ragged coat, his skin pale and almost translucent in the dim light. The man politely asked if he could come inside, just for a few minutes to warm up. Though every instinct urged him to close the door, Marcus felt a strange sense of obligation and allowed him in. The man stepped inside and sat quietly, his gaze drifting across the room, lingering on the shadows and corners as if seeing something Marcus couldn't. When Marcus offered him a plate of food, the man accepted but only took a single bite. He looked at Marcus again, offering that same sad, vacant smile. "Thank you. It's been so long since I had a Thanksgiving meal," he murmured, his voice distant as if he was speaking from another time. Then, without warning, the man was gone. One moment he was there, the next Marcus was alone, staring at an empty chair. He sat in stunned silence, questioning his sanity. Had he imagined the entire encounter? Had loneliness gotten to him? Trying to shake off the eerie feeling, Marcus scanned the room, and his eyes landed on an old photograph hanging on the wall. It was of his family's Thanksgiving celebration years ago, one of the few happy memories he had. But as he looked closer, his blood ran cold. In the background, near the edge of the photo, stood the same frail man, dressed in the same tattered coat, with that same empty, haunting expression. He had been watching them even then. The next day, Marcus received a call. His estranged brother had passed away suddenly, late on Thanksgiving night. In disbelief, Marcus glanced once more at the family photo on the wall. As he studied it, his eyes locked onto his brother's face. The same sad, familiar smile that he had seen on the mysterious man in the cabin. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And this Thanksgiving, remember, when the past comes calling, some doors are best left unopened. Happy haunting, and we'll see you next time for more tales of terror.